It's impossible to know the future, but what's not impossible is discovering patterns and trends of history and of human nature. Human nature rarely changes, if ever. It doesn't matter a people's great technology, scientific breakthroughs, inventions, military power, or economic wealth. Human beings tend to always follow a specific path, thus helping us to see the patterns and what may be around the corner. Looking at these patterns may be depressing, may bring a little discouragement, or make one anxious. It is meant to do the opposite, however. It is meant to bring hope, understanding, human civility. Understanding this makes the study of history so important. It is very difficult for a contemporary society of people to see themselves for who they are. But if we can see ourselves by studying through the lens of the past, we will find the rhythm of past generations. We will open our eyes a little wider and see where we are heading, and perhaps help us change course. This is how we remain free. It's embracing our past mistakes, seeing how much better we have become, and moving forward. A nation that is ashamed of her history and seeks to erase it, ironically, will only be doomed to repeat it. Slowly we become what we hate, even though we have the best of intentions. This is why a free nation must be ever vigilant in its quest to remain free. Freedom can be lost in a night if we are not watching, for the dangerous traps of tyranny are always laying in wait to steal our freedoms 1% at a time. In this first episode, we will look at the difficulty of a people to be fair in the way they see themselves for who they truly are, and how man can be a little blind at times. We will look at natural law and how it is our compass and guide to good governing laws both collectively and individually. We will end with the great teacher of human nature, the Bible, and see how a 2,000-year-old scripture is repeating the pattern of today. Welcome to Threading History.
Welcome to Threading History, where we explore the patterns of history and unravel the past to discover the future. Here we'll take a look at human nature and how through the course of history it rarely changes, how culture and society shape us, and finally, we will look at the individual who is the true agent of change in society. Okay guys, I'm Ben here, I've got James with me. We wanted to get a little deeper into those three themes that we had talked about in the intro. And in doing so, we were looking around for some stories and some different material that we thought would expand on what we'd put in that intro. And we came upon the allegory of the cave by Plato. So I've got James here with me. He really knows this story very well, and I want to let him begin by telling us this story.
Yeah, well, the allegory of the cave, it's kind of dark, right?
Yeah,
if you really look at it, it's kind of dark. It's like, I don't want to be that guy who is, I guess to start out, I mean, you have prisoners who are in a cave, and they cannot, they're looking at this stone wall in this cave, and they're chained to where they cannot move their heads to the right nor to the left, like it is always staring at this wall. And then their hands are bound and their feet are bound, like this is their life. That is like such a depressing imagery, and I think that's what the idea of Plato wanted to do, was really capture this imagery.
Because this is an expression of life, right? Of what life is. It's important to note that these guys, these prisoners, are here since birth. This is all they've known. Right?
This is all they've known. And so to understand a little bit deeper, we have to know what's behind them. Behind them, there is this big fire. And what it does is it's casting shadows onto this wall, because you have a walkway that's coming across the in front of the fire, and it's constantly all these prisoners sees these shadows coming up. And over time, they're able to start giving names to some of the different shadows they see. So whether it's animals or people, and I think that's important too, you know, to give names to things, and when you hear the sound, they hear the sounds, and they try to differentiate these things that are happening. And
I think that's what we do within life, within our own spheres of knowledge, is we try to classify, we try to identify, we try to discover what is within our sight, right?
Well, that's an important thing, and we do this because that's what makes us feel comfortable.
Right. Because all of a sudden the unknown becomes known, more or less, right? When we start to give names and identifiers to certain things.
It's defining things.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So important. An important part of human nature is to help us to feel comfortable. Well, let's go to one of the prisoners then who is chained up. He is freed. It doesn't really say how he is freed. He's just freed one day. What I find is interesting about this prisoner, though, is it's not like he just jumps up and says, I'm going to break free and run out of this cave. Because he's been there since birth, right?
Yeah.
This is all he knows. And so they have to force him out of this cave.
Well, I think it's a slow go for him, right? Because this is all he's known. It's a slow walk of, I'm going to stumble over stones. I'm going to, grapple and feel and follow my way out of this cave toward the light, right?
Yeah, well, they have to drag him out of the cave. They finally drag him out of the cave, and he tries to, the first thing you see, if you're in a cave your whole life, this is how dark I think this story is. I mean, just the torture of going outside for the first time ever, and the sun just shining down on you, and that's what happens to him. Is the sun, that's the first thing he sees, and it just shines down on him, and his eyes, that would cause a lot of pain. And he has to look for other means to start finding, a true reality outside of the cave. But once he does that, he starts discovering that maybe what the shadows, what he was seeing, not a true reality.
Right, reflections of what actually is. Right?
Yeah, so he starts at night, I think, if I remember it, like trying to find things at night or reflections in the water. And but he is eventually able to see the sun and feel the sun. And I think the sun is kind of like it's that truth that we're trying to discover. Maybe that's what Plato was trying to say, is he finally reaches out and finds that sun. It shines down on him, and he's able to accept the truth.
Right, the source of all light.
The source of all light that he wasn't able to find within the cave.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what do you want to do when you discover a fun and exciting truth or something new that you're like, wow, that was awesome?
Well, it fires you up. You want to go and share it with those you care about, right?
Well, that's exactly what he did. Now, this is the part that I love about the story, because I think it follows human nature so well.
Mm-hmm.
He goes back to the cave and he talks to his prisoners, and he's trying to get them, hey, I've got to show you what I know now.
There's something more.
Yeah, I've seen the sun.
Mm-hmm.
But when he gets there, he's not used to the dark. Now he's gotten used to the true reality, and when he goes in the cave, his eyes aren't adjusted. It's kind of an awkward situation for him. And the prisoners are like, what are you talking about? And they don't want any part of it. In fact, they go to such extremes of saying, hey, if anybody goes outside of this cave, we'll kill him. We don't want him to become like this guy. He's gotten weird. I love this allegory because I think it shows human nature so well. I think we want to be comfortable at times in our ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
I think we want to stay in this box that feels so comfortable to us.
Right, because in that way, a lot of the time you avoid fear, right? Living in this state of comfort, this box, we're just good. We're at peace, right, with what we know.
Well, I love that, right? I think human nature desires that. We just want peace in our lives.
Mm-hmm. But I think the beautiful thing about this is it's showing that if you break out of the cave, break off the chains, you're finding light, right? You're finding truth.
Well, that's the reward of leaving the cave.
Mm-hmm.
It's finding the truth.
It might not be comfortable at all times.
At first, it's not comfortable. Remember, when he leaves the cave, it's not comfortable at first.
And it hurts his eyes, right?
Hurts his eyes, but it's when he wants to share it because he has finally seen the truth. It's hard work getting to that place of breaking out of this box, right? This ignorance. It's really hard work to get to. Do you know what scripture it reminds me of?
What's that?
It reminds me of that scripture when Jesus is on the sermon, when he's giving the Sermon on the Mount, and he talks about how, well, I'm just going to read it. It says, "And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, Let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye." I mean, how often does Jesus say in the scriptures, you are blind and you are deaf as a society, like is a culture. You're blind and deaf to what is happening around you.
He says it a lot, right?
Yeah, he says it a lot, and but I think that's where we go with human nature is we are so blind to when we're living in the moment, we can become so blind to what is happening around us. We are really slaves to our culture in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we become so entrenched to what we know, right?
So entrenched, and some of the ways that we become entrenched are peer pressure, right? We don't want people to see, that we are different in some way. We always want to be a part of the masses.
Right, and I think that peer pressure comes from family, friends, right? There's a lot of, you got to be this way, you've got to believe this way, right?
Well, how often when you want to go share that truth, right? Who's the first one to be the naysayer and say, whoa, 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 whoa. Careful there, Ben.
Typically the family, right?
Family or friends. I think I've had it happen to me a few times.
Right. Well, I think we all have.
I think we all have.
Uh-huh.
And it always kind of puts us back in check, like, maybe I'm a little bit crazy.
Well, it puts us back in the chains, right? It puts us back in the, I won't look this way or that. Let's just take a peek at the shadows with my family and friends, right? Because you don't want to be different. There's this fear of being the weirdo, right?
Well, I think it's a fear, human nature, there's a fear of not being accepted.
Right.
Too. We need to feel accepted amongst our peers.
That's not...
and our groups.
Right.
And therefore, we become partisans in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to define partisan for us?
Yeah, in fact, I want to pull up the definition of partisan here. So when I look it up online, the first definition is a strong supporter of a party, cause, or person. So in essence, you're taking a side. You're joining a party, right?
Not only do you join a party, but you are not going to move away from that party. Like once a partisan, always a partisan, and it doesn't matter what the party, what their ideas are, or what they give. I mean, they could go out and give the craziest things, and you would be like, "But I am still a Democrat,
right?
Or I am still a Republican."
Yeah, we do that so much in our society today, right? It's where we are the Democrat or we are the Republican, and it doesn't matter where they go because you've already identified that is me, and you stop thinking for yourself, right?
Well, it's not only in politics, right? We do that in, I think, a lot of different areas within our lives, and where we become partisan to our ideas and to the way, like. We're partisans from birth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore it's hard for us to see outside of that box.
Right.
And and I think that's okay. I don't necessarily think that's a bad part of human nature. I think it is just a part of human nature.
Mm-hmm.
But every once in a while, we talked in the intro how the individual is the agent of change, the true agent of change.
Mm-hmm.
It's these individuals who have come throughout history who have made great changes. They almost step outside of the box, and they're able to see differently. And then what happens is the naysayers come out and shame them, but over time, their ideas catch hold if it's a good idea.
Right.
Right?
Right.
and then you see these agents, these individuals who are agents of change, who change society for the better. They take society forward. They help society to progress. It's not a political party that will help society progress because they're stuck in their own box.
Right.
It's going to be an individual who helps people see outside of that box.
Right.
And that partisanship.
Well, it's a lot of time in those parties or in those boxes, it's not... How do I word what I'm thinking? I think that the people within it, they're not really worried about testing their beliefs or models to make sure they're good and right. I think it's more about gathering power for the party, right? Rather than elevating its members in truth, right?
I think so, and I think that's why the individual is so important.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about a few individuals waking up to say, I can be a change for good.
Right.
And then that will catch momentum.
Mm.
But they've got to be individuals who are looking outside of the box and not going along with the phrase of society.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're just going along with peer pressures and the phrase of society, I mean, look at what we are seeing today, how businesses, corporations, I think this is popular, so this is the wave I'm going to ride.
Right.
There's a real danger in that, right? Like, I am just catching the wave. I'm not really standing up for anything.
Well, what does James say in the New Testament? He's got a scripture in there. I'm gonna botch it here, but it's tossed to and fro in a windstorm. You know what I'm talking about? You gotta be solid in something, right?
Well, let's go back to this idea of being a partisan, right? I love the story of Socrates, his death.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's so much power in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
So going back, so the listeners can understand, Socrates, first of all, he was an agent of change, right? He would go around and make people feel uncomfortable with and he did it through questions.
Right.
And he, as he went around and made people feel uncomfortable, he wasn't liked by a whole lot of people. So the status quo, they came in and like, we got to get rid of this guy.
He's corrupting the youth.
He's corrupting the youth. What else did they get him on? Corruption of the youth and impetus or something. I can't remember.
It was, I think, steering people away from the old gods or something.
Steering
like
people
that.
away from the old gods. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And but I love this story. His death. His friends come to see him.
Mm-hmm.
And
he didn't have many friends, right? His students.
But he did have his students who the youth, they caught on to what he was doing and what he's trying to do.
Right.
But this is the words of Socrates, his own words at the moment right before. These are the last hours of his life.
Right. And what happened leading up to that? I think it's important to know that he was sentenced to die by the government at the time, right? They said, you've corrupted the youth, you've taken things too far, you're going to be executed, right?
Yeah. And there's a way for Socrates to get out of this. In fact, I think his students come to say, hey, let's get you out.
Mm-hmm.
But through his idea of honor, and I'm going to stand up for something, no, this is something that I must do. I am not bigger than society.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not above society. And these are his words, quoting Socrates right before his death. At this moment I am sensible that I have not the temper of a seeker after knowledge. Like the vulgar, I am only a partisan. There's that word partisan.
Mm-hmm.
Here he is, he's about to die, and he realizes, I am still a partisan. I tried to look outside of the box, but he's telling his students, I am still a partisan. For the partisan, when he is engaged in a dispute, cares nothing about the rights of the question. They don't question anything.
Well, and they don't care about the truth is what he's getting at, right? They just want to force their side.
They want to force their side. They don't care about the facts.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care about the truth.
Everybody's got an agenda, right?
Yeah, it's their agenda, whether for power or for their ideas. and not to, and maybe they just want, it's their way of being safe, right? But is anxious only to convince his hearers. So that's what the partisan does. Only anxious to convince his hearers.
Right.
And the difference between him and me at the present moment is only this: that while he seeks to convince his hearers that what he says is true, I am seeking to convince myself. To convince my hearers is a secondary matter with me. And do but see how much I have to gain by this. For if what I say is true, then I do well to believe it. And if there be nothing after death, still I shall save my friends from grief during the sort of short time that has left me, and my ignorance will do me no harm. This is the state of mind in which I approach the argument, and I would ask you to be thinking of the truth and not of Socrates. Even at his death, like he is trying to pull his students. It doesn't matter about me.
What matters is
to the truth. Look for truth. Look for that standard. Agree with me if I seem to you to speak the truth, or if not, withstand me might and main, that I may not deceive you as well as myself in my desire. And like the bee, leave my sting in you before I die. And now let us proceed. I love that. I think that is such a, like, it's just captures you of seeing this man about to die, and it shows the type of man he was when he's at the
death's door, right?
Precipice of death. Here he is, search for truth. I myself still am a partisan.
Yeah, I'm fallible.
Infallible, or fallible. Go out and find that truth in your life. Don't stay in a box. This is his cry to his students.
So I guess the question is, or what we need to dig into is, how do we do that in our daily lives? How do we get to that? This is Socrates' final cry, his final plea. Go, discover what's true and real. Forget about me. Find what is true and right. How do we do that?
Well, before we answer that question, how do we do that? I think we have to remember, people are entrenched in their cultural biases and beliefs. And we become blind to those. We're all partisans. Even when we're trying not to be partisan, we're still partisans. It's something, a lifelong journey that we're always have to break out of and break free from. We have to take Socrates' idea of truth, always looking for that standard of truth, and then we have to look for where that standard is. The standard that I love and that I try to live my life around is this idea of inalienable rights or natural law, which once again comes from Western civilization, and has come throughout the ages and has been built upon. And you have Cicero, you have Thomas Aquinas, you have Roman law, you have John Locke, and they're all building upon this idea of natural law and what it means to them in society, and they're constantly trying to figure this out. Like, where is this standard? We have to have a standard. And it finally came down to the Declaration of Independence. And I think the Declaration of Independence has captured what natural law or inalienable rights is so well. I'm going to read this quote from the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Now, these are self-evident truths, right? They are. They always have been. They always will be.
Self-evident being plain and simple, this is what it is. It is what it means. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And John Locke, he added the words property, which are such an important part of those inalienable rights. But then he goes on to say that government is created to secure these rights, these inalienable rights among men. That's all they're supposed to do, is to secure your inalienable rights of life, liberty, property, and your pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
What happens if government goes beyond that protection of inalienable rights? It says it right here. Further on in Declaration of Independence, it says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute a new government. That's a powerful standard.
Mm-hmm.
That when your natural rights, your inalienable rights, are infringed upon, it's time for you to say, I'm done with this.
Right.
This is no longer good for me.
Well, it says that that's our right. But I think, and this is just my thought, I think beyond our right, I think it's our duty as the governed to restore government to its founding of, hey, your sole charge, your sole responsibility is to protect these inalienable rights given us by God.
Well, it's our duty because we have to protect them for future generations.
Right. It won't be just us that feels the repercussions. It'll be our lineage, right?
Well, let's go a little deeper, delve a little deeper into these, into inalienable rights, the natural law. Life.
Mm.
You have a right to live your life.
Right.
What does that mean?
Well, I think it means a lot of things, right? It means that we have the right to earn a living, right? It's a right to...
Well, it's your search for happiness.
Mm.
It's a ways and means to make a living. It's also you. Nobody can hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
Like your life is important,
Right.
according to the natural law of the universe and of God.
Right.
Nobody can take away your life, nor can you take away anybody else's life.
Right. Because to do so would be contrary to natural law.
It would be contrary to natural law, and you would have to face a deeper punishment beyond that, right?
Right.
So when you take away somebody else's life, you forfeit your own life.
Mm.
That's how natural law. It is. You give up something if you take something. If you take that life away,
'Cause natural law is just.
it is just, and that's why war. If you're coming against somebody, you can't let somebody just take away your life. That is it's your right to defend your life.
Mm-hmm.
Liberty. I love this one. Because I think there is something within man, an innate part of man, that wants to be free.
Right.
It makes him whole.
Man is built to be free. Man is meant to be free.
And I think if we look throughout the course of history, man has rarely had those freedoms to live his life. I mean, how long was it till man was free to have a conscience, right? How long could it have been for man to have true liberties, to worship freely? We've gone through so many governments they've done the opposite of respecting inalienable rights and natural law. They sought to destroy, like the individual was not important. One's conscience was not important.
It was all about the many, right?
It was all about the many. The collective.
Mm-hmm.
But natural law and natural rights, it's all about the individual.
Right.
It's protecting that individual.
Right. And I think in saying that, it's not to say that individuals should be selfish, right? Or that it's all about me. But I think what it is to say is when an individual can thrive, society as a whole thrives, because you have a people full of passion about life, right? A people with energy, vigor, ready to create something that benefits all of mankind. But the individual, being that impetus of change, has to be preserved.
Well, and I think that's when governments protect natural laws, natural rights of man, that's what happens within a society collectively.
It flourishes.
It flourishes because you're going to have the passion, you're going to have the vigor, You're going to catch the spirit of entrepreneurship, of creating things and building things.
And leaving a legacy.
Mm-hmm. Which goes right into pursuit of happiness.
Right.
That is man's lifelong continual pursuit.
Right. Can you imagine the doldrum of life if we didn't have the freedom, the liberty, and the God-given right to say, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to create. This is what I want to fulfill with this time that I've been given. Wouldn't that be terrible if it was, hey, everything's handed to you, shut up, your thoughts don't matter?
Well, this is what I love is your pursuit of happiness is never done.
It's never over. There's always a new venture.
When you think you're done with one area, you're like, now I'm ready for this.
Yeah, it's continual progression, right? When everything's given to you on a silver platter and it's hush hush, eat up and go to your room, it's what are you creating? What are you leaving behind? But when it's, hey, you're free. Go ahead and run, kid. There's always something new. You become better, right? The world becomes better as you create.
Well, and I think that's what happens with a free people is there's a lot of people pursuing their happiness and their personal life mission.
Right.
And when you have a taste of these freedoms, I think you become a people who don't obey easily government, right?
Right.
You've had that taste of freedom, and you're kind of like you're a people, and I think that's how America used to be.
I think so, because it was built upon the notion that government would protect these inalienable rights, right? And it created this passionate people. And I think governments aren't instituted to be obeyed and to have full power and control, right? I think they're instituted to do their original purpose, protect the individual's inalienable rights.
Well, and I think it helps an individual follow that common sense.
Mm.
You don't have a bunch of individuals running around, and you know what? It reminds me, I read somewhere about animals and how wild animals, they have shown that their brains are so much bigger than domesticated animals.
Really?
Yeah, because domesticated animals, everything's given to them.
Yeah, hush, hush.
Hush, hush, here's you go. Here's
Uh-huh.
your water and food. Let me let you out to go to the bathroom. I mean, everything's taken care of for these domesticated animals. Whereas a wild animal, they're trying to survive, right? They're still that passion and the excitement of life where they're their true nature. They're their true selves.
Right. Well, they have to expand beyond their self. It has to be something greater to survive, right? And to thrive.
And that's the danger of a domesticated people. I think we stop looking for common sense. Mm-hmm. We start believing everything that's told to us. We start becoming more partisan. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why our natural rights and natural law is so important to hold on to. It is our standard.
Right.
And the standard, we can't leave out property because, man, if I work hard, and if I was not able to enjoy the fruits of my labor, or if I worked so hard and somebody came in and took away the fruits of my labor,
right,
I wouldn't want to work anymore.
No, who would? It crushes your spirit, right?
It totally crushes your spirit.
Yeah.
But when I work hard because I can see those fruits and I can say, I'm building something here.
Mm-hmm. Right. If you run out and you bust your butt to make $500 and someone comes in and says, hey, Jimmy down the street gets 200 of that, just so you know.
It's a little bit disheartening.
Oh, hugely disheartening. I wouldn't want to do it.
Well,
why does Jimmy get my money, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why John Locke, that's why he talks so much about this idea of property, that it's man's right to hold on to his property.
What they worked so hard to attain.
But that's also the beauty of charity, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because charity comes from me giving from my free will.
Right.
Not the government telling me you have to give to them.
Right.
That doesn't feel good to me.
No, right? Because you want to be good because you are good. If I bust my butt to earn that same $500 and I find that Jimmy's in need, wow, how good would I feel to give him that $200 that I didn't want to give when I was told to, right?
It makes you feel pretty good.
Yeah.
If all men lived by this one standard, we would have such an amazing world. You would have the individual thriving in so many different ways.
Which would cause all of society to thrive, right?
Which would cause all of society to thrive.
I think it's important to say that on the opposite end is a people in a world that does not hold to these principles can't help but fall.
Well, and I think that's why this podcast is so important, is we want to look at the path of society and those points of, okay, here's the tipping points of your society. If this happens, the consequence is this.
Mm-hmm.
All societies at some point rise, but all societies too, they must fall.
Right.
And as we look at these tipping points, then we're helping people to see where we're at, and maybe to help them see, I need to look outside of the box a little bit here. I've got to stop listening to the media. I need to become a wild animal.
Yeah.
I need to be wild and free, baby.
Right.
I need to go out in the wild and just hunt.
Right. Hunt for opportunity, hunt for creation, hunt for purpose, passion, right?
Charity does feel good, but what happens if the government takes away our ability to give because they take so much of our money through taxes, so many of our fruits, quote unquote, from tax? Did you know that before 1913 Americans did not pay income tax?
No, I didn't know that.
I don't think most people know that.
How did the government survive?
Well, through the taxes on sales and
Gotcha.
Because we had so few. I mean, government was only to protect was instituted among men, right? Going back to the Declaration of Independence, was instituted among men to protect these inalienable rights. That's their job. They go beyond that, government becomes a little bit dangerous, and because it can't stop taking from the people.
Right.
This is the problem with liberty, like in giving people their inalienable, making sure that these inalienable rights are protected. Government can't help themselves because freedom is ugly sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
We make some really stupid choices. And today, right, with this cancel culture thing,
mm-hmm.
you make a mistake at the age of 9, you're done for, right?
Right. It follows you. It goes back.
Yeah, it follows you.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, government's the same way. Like, they are constantly... they see, oh my gosh, freedom is ugly at times. Well, freedom's not always ugly, because over time, people, they learn from their mistakes and they fix things. That's why we've come so far from where we were, from the 1800s,
right.
Early 1900s, right? We keep on progressing naturally as a society through freedom.
Without government's help.
Without government's help.
Right.
Problem is, government can't help itself. It always has to be involved. Thomas Jefferson, he died when the government had 8,000 workers in it. He's like, whoa, oh my gosh, we have too many government workers.
Uh-huh.
This is way too much. This is not going to be good for the society. He got it. He understood it.
Uh-huh.
I think, what do we have today? 2 to 3 million government workers?
A ton, yeah.
It's just a ton. Like, I think the federal government is the biggest employer of the United States. But that's what they do. They have to keep on. So government has to go through, and they have to figure, if you let them go beyond your inalienable rights, they become a danger, because they will never stop in 1913, they said, hey, we're only going to take the top 1% earners.
Just a little bit.
That's all we're going to do is tax them. The richest people in America.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. We never ever will it go beyond this.
Right.
Well, guess what happened?
We're taxed. Yeah, everybody's taxed today.
Not only taxed, but we're taxed
pretty heavily.
Pretty heftily, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's these incremental shifts, right? Where they just slowly, it's just a little. You don't have to look closely. It's just a little, right?
Or it's just going to stop here. It never just stops there.
Right, because it hits that wall, and then they go, well, what more could we do?
Don't they have a word for that? Kind of an Overton window, where you keep on sliding society a little bit more.
Right.
Shift here. Mm-hmm. Only this much. We'll never go further.
But they always go further.
They always go further.
Mm-hmm.
Because we become desensitized to what it was before.
Yeah, well, I mean, as old generations pass away, the new generation didn't see what it was like, and it's just this slow-moving grab so that no one ever actually sees it coming, right?
And it's not like the government is the best people to insure with your money.
Yeah, you don't want to entrust them with every aspect of your life.
When I give, I want to give freely
Right.
to my fellow man.
Right.
If the government forces me to give, it doesn't feel good to me.
Right.
There's nothing inside of me that says, woo, I pay more taxes.
Well, I think the issue with that is it's not that they're forcing you to give, it's that they have this expectation that you will give and you will give this amount, and they decide where that money's going to, right? They decide who to help and who not to help.
Well, and then that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
They're deciding who to help.
Right.
And they pick the groups or the businesses to subsidize and help.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes a huge problem. Because then they become the judge of who they're helping.
Mm-hmm.
They decide what groups to help. They decide which groups not to help. And they decide where the taxpayers' money goes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where these subtle changes, when America starts infringing on these natural rights, this is the danger of your nation starting to crumble a little bit.
Right, because you never see it coming because it's so subtle for so long, right?
Well, this is the erosion.
Mm-hmm.
This is when the erosion begins.
Mm-hmm.
When the government feels that it can start taking from and start giving to other marginalized groups.
Right.
It's not their duty to give to marginalized groups.
No.
It's their duty to protect marginalized groups, that they have the same rights as any other group, that they have the same opportunity as any other group.
Those inalienable rights.
Those inalienable rights, and then they will feel the essence, and they will become a group that is no longer marginalized, right? Because they can grow through those rights.
Right, because they'll have the same opportunity.
There have been so many groups in America, starting from the 1600s, going into the 1700s. You're always bringing in marginalized groups.
Mm-hmm.
But the groups that were marginalized in the 16 and 1700s, they're no longer marginalized today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because the government didn't have that strong arm of, we're going to save you, we're going to help you.
Right, it was the governed who said, this is what we want society to become, right?
And then the government sees themselves as God, right?
Mm.
We'll take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
You're so little that you'll never be able to.
You'll never see what we see. You'll never know what we know. Let us handle it.
It becomes such an insidious route,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the fringes and the threads of society
Mm-hmm.
start unraveling a little bit.
Right.
And this is where we want to go into, because when you start seeing those threads of erosion and how they start happening, then you can understand where we're at today and how we want to look at how those incremental shifts, it never stopped. It's going to destroy our nation if they keep on going down this route.
Right.
And how it will happen. We want to show how it will happen.
Right.
But what I do know is, with what's coming, and if we allow this to go further and further, we will lose our inalienable rights.
Freedom will die.
Freedom will die.
Mm.
And most of us will sit back and say, now what just happened here? Because it's going to keep on happening and happening until we wake up one day and say, I might be in a marginalized group.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the government to help me? That's why we can never and never should have from the beginning look to the government to save us.
Right.
It has to come from the charity of the individuals.
Right.
Because when you have that charity, because those marginalized groups, they're the wild animals, right? It gives them a chance to keep fighting in the world until they become
something.
Right.
And I think it's more than just the charity of the individual. It's the leadership of the individual, the courageousness of somebody that's going to run like wild, right? To become this wild animal that will say, let me create, let me guide, let me lead, right? And it's not that the people that will follow that person are putting all of their eggs in that person's basket, but they are looking at, in essence, a reflection of what they could be if they learn to walk the walk, right?
Why is it, or how has it gotten to the place where we are at a point where we just want to believe everything the government tells us? I heard a politician get on the other day and he says, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you free food, free education, free housing, free whatever you want. Vote me in.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is not right. This goes against our compass, natural law.
Right. Because in essence, what he's saying is, let me take care of everything while I kill your spirit. Right?
Governments can't do that anyway.
No.
They can't get, there is a consequence for them.
They're crossing that threshold, right? Of, this is my duty, and I've overstepped it. My duty to provide a protection to the individual and their inalienable rights to let me become God for you, right?
Well, and I love that because natural law is the protection. It's nature, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which nature says, if you do A, then consequence B will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And as the government keeps on doing this, even though what they say and their intentions are so pure because they want to help and give so much, it doesn't always end up in a way that helps anybody.
I would say almost never, because they are stepping on those inalienable rights in their attempts to help, right?
Well, and I think when politicians start making promises, the promises that your group likes, then you start looking, you start putting yourselves in that box, that allegorical box that we started with in the beginning of the cave. You start looking at that box and you start thinking in terms of not as an individual, but you start looking in terms of left or right, liberal, conservative. This is who I am.
Right. You strap on the chains of that group.
And even the news sources have become that, right? We are this. They don't say it maybe, but as you listen to them, they have pushed themselves so far into a box to say, this is who we are.
That's all that they share or
That's
portray.
all they share. So we're losing truth. We're losing common sense. We're missing all of these things that help us to remain free because we don't know where to turn to. We've lost that compass in our lives. I think that's why we always have to be that, we have to think in terms of being that wild animal.
Right.
We have to be that individual that is constantly separating ourselves.
Pushing the envelope.
To say, I know I'm a partisan, but I know I shouldn't. I've got to look at those choices that are going to help me to remain free as an individual.
Right.
I'm not going to get caught up in what the media says. I'm not going to get caught up in what the government says or what the politicians. I'm going to think for myself.
Right. You're going to test those models.
I'm going to test those models. I'm going to put it against natural law.
Right.
That's going to be my compass.
That's the key.
That's the key. And that's how you know if something is good and if something is not so good.
Right. Because if you take this compass, these inalienable rights and natural law, and you put it up against something that you are following, believing in, whatever it be, and you see, oh, I'm being set up to be better than someone, or, oh, I am taking someone's life, or, oh, I am taking someone's property, right? You just check it against all of these things. Oh, okay, this isn't what I want to be. This isn't what I want to do. You can be sure that you're out of line when you are not in line with those inalienable rights.
I love this compass because you can always see a government or groups of people or corporations that are pushing too hard and crossing over and trampling upon your individual rights, your liberties.
What gives you such a clarity, right, of what's true and right?
And whenever I hear a politician or a corporation or something that is infringing upon my right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and especially my property, my fruits of my labor, my hard work, I know I need to turn elsewhere at times, right? But I think this is where the collapse of society begins. We want to take people from the start. Where does it begin? It starts when the government starts taking and trampling upon those rights of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, inalienable rights.
Which has been happening for a long time now.
It's been happening for a long time. We want to look at, but this is where it starts. It starts with these politicians who keep on taking away from the people more and more and more because it's never enough.
Right.
Then government's never going to stop and say, we're going to take everything of the top 10% earners in America. They're not going to stop with the top 10%. They're not going to stop at the top 20%.
Well, that's the thing is, the problem with the government right now is they are not checking themselves against these inalienable rights. None of them are ever going to stop and go, we've gone a little too far, guys. Let's backpedal. Doesn't work that way.
Well, and that's where, so this is where the downfall starts. It begins. This is where collapse begins. It begins with the arrogance of the politicians. We don't have to have a budget because we can take from you, or we can create it out of thin air, right?
Right.
It's that pride. The arrogance. But they're hypocrites. They haven't had a true hard work day in their life, and that's why it's so easy for them to take away from other people.
They're so detached from the common man.
They're so detached from the common man, but we're in this box, and everything that we say, yeah. Okay. Should we take people on the ride of the first, we're going to touch upon the first pattern of history that we want to start with?
I think so. Let's get into it.
I think it's time. So I think the scriptures are the best place. What are the scriptures? It's history.
Right.
It's a pattern of history that has happened because of human nature over and over and over. And so we really get in touch with human nature within the individual. And with groups and the communal society at large.
Right.
And we get to see how we become slaves to that culture of our society.
Right.
How we become victims of the hubris of our politicians. So I think the scripture are a perfect place to start of looking through the past to discover where we're at today in history.
Oh, yeah. Where are we starting? What scripture are we headed to?
So we're going to go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2.
Okay.
When you're looking for the patterns of history, you want to look to try to find what's happening in contemporary times, right? In your time right now. So we got to go back and we got to find, where is this beginning? Where is the collapse starting? Where does it start and how does it start? This is going to be fun. Are you ready for this?
I'm excited for this. I got my scriptures out. I'm ready to bust into this.
Okay, let's have a little scripture study then. Let's start here.
Love to study my scriptures.
That's a good thing.
Let's do this.
Okay, so 2 Thessalonians, we're listening to Paul, and we're going to start in verse 1.
Okay.
He says, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter, as from us, as that the day of Christ is at hand." So here he's saying, hey, these are troubled times. Don't be afraid. They're crazy times. Don't be troubled. I think there's a lot of people troubled by mind today.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? There's huge events coming in government, elections. There's riots in the streets. There's calls for change, and there's a lot of uncertainty of what's coming next.
We have to look at it in their time. He says, don't be troubled by word.
Nor by letter.
Word and letter, you can look at that as the media, TV today.
Right.
Don't be troubled by the things you're hearing because, man, there's going to be some scary stuff. That's what sells, right?
Right.
He goes on to say, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." So here he is, he's saying, you're going to be deceived. There is a possibility there's going to be a lot of deception going on.
Right.
And if you're not careful, if you don't have that standard of truth, that natural law, you're going to be deceived.
Right. And I don't think he's saying there may be a lot of deception. I think there is.
There is a lot of deception.
Right, no question.
There's no question about that. "For that day shall not come except there be a falling away first." That falling away from truth.
Falling away from those inalienable rights, from the moralities.
The standard.
Mm-hmm.
And that man, I'm going to put this man in parentheses, that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. If you were to name a name, and I was to ask you, who does the media, other politicians, society, our entertainers,
all of America,
a lot of America,
right.
the ones that we see on TV and stuff, who would be the man of perdition, the son of perdition?
Oh, this wicked, vile bigot.
Who is it?
Oh, I'd have to say good old Donald.
You're seeing it.
Right.
Yeah, Donald Trump.
Uh-huh.
Here we have the evil man, the son of perdition, right?
Quote unquote, right?
Quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
Who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God, or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. What does the media and the politicians tell us about this man?
This is exactly what they're saying right now, right? He is not going to leave. He's not going to leave once he gets voted out, right? He thinks he's God in there, thinks he has full control, right? Isn't this exactly what they're saying about him right now?
This is exactly what they're saying about him, and this is and they're painting a picture of him that he is the most evil person to ever live.
This tyrannical monster, right?
I turn on anything or I listen to the Democratic Convention. All it was there was no ideas of this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to give. It was all, we're going to destroy this man. Yeah. You've got to vote for us.
What a terrible job he's done. Did you see how great I did when I was in office? Right?
It's great. This is happening today.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you agree with him or not, or like him or not, this is what they're portraying him as. We're seeing the cycle of history before our very eyes. Let's go on. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things. Hey, I've given you this pattern for a reason. You knew this was going to come up.
Right.
You better be careful not to be deceived when it comes.
Right.
And I'll tell you why you shouldn't be deceived. Listen to the next one. And now ye know what withholdeth that he might be revealed in his time. We're going to reveal what's happening in the time. But we're also going to reveal what's coming after.
Okay.
It's not fun what's coming after. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready for it. It's not fun, but it is fun, right?
It's kind of fun.
It's totally.
For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. Here's the mystery of iniquity, right? You have to create such a chaos and such a hate for an individual that everybody's just like, I need peace in my life.
They're weaving this huge web of lies to conceal what is true, right? That is the mystery of iniquity doing its work.
And I think it's the pattern of iniquity, right? You destroy a people, every tyrant who doesn't like any group, they just start talking bad about them, destroying them until they have no relevance anymore.
They create this common enemy that people can destroy, right?
Nobody wants to believe. Nobody will believe that person anymore.
Right.
They have no influence anymore.
Until he be taken out of the way, right?
Until he be taken out of the way. Which means the pattern of history is we will take this man out of the way. We'll make him so irrelevant that we will get rid of him. And then, here's where it gets really scary fun. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming.
Do you think this is kind of interesting here that wicked is capitalized?
Wicked is capitalized.
Isn't that interesting?
It's a person who's coming.
Right.
After the quote-unquote evil son of perdition is taken away.
Right.
He's not the one capitalized with wicked. It's the person who comes
after.
Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs and lyings and wonder. Is that not today? I've never I don't know if politicians are capable of telling the truth today.
Right. They're not. They'll say whatever they want or think will get them a step up, right?
And then we keep on believing everything they say.
Right. Even when sometimes they come out right and say, ha 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 ha, I lied, right?
We still believe the next lie.
So we keep believing their lies.
We can't help ourselves.
Right.
Do you think it's because we're in the box?
Well, yeah, I do. I do in a lot of ways, right? We're in this box, and
Or do you think it's because people don't want to believe what's coming? They don't want to believe that bad is coming, or want to believe that things are going to get worse.
right. But don't you think that's kind of the box in the way is you're staying in this box to avoid the fear of what is to come, right? And we want to feel that comfort.
Well, remember the man, when he first is let loose, he doesn't want to leave on his own. He has to be dragged out of the cave.
Right.
You have to go through a little pain.
Right. Verse 10.
And with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. We lose truth, and therefore we're deceived.
Yeah, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, right? Who are they that perish? It's those who say, I'm just going to sit back and let it happen. I'm just going to believe because I want to believe that only good is coming, right?
So they don't stand up.
Right. And what does that do? You perish.
I think there's a lot of people right now
Mm-hmm.
who wish they could stand up.
Totally. Yeah.
But going back, I think it's really hard to do.
Well, it's hard to set yourself apart, right? I think in a lot of ways it puts a target on your back, and that causes a lot of fear.
Or the loss of a job. How
Right.
many people have lost their jobs because they stood up?
Too many.
Too many.
Mm-hmm.
How many people have been shunned by their peers?
All for having pride in the nation.
All for having pride? We live in some crazy times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But now we're seeing the patterns of those times, the beginning of the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie.
In essence, he's saying, here you go. You know what? You haven't stood up. You haven't played your part. Here. Take what they're given.
And they keep on believing the lie.
Right.
They want to believe that lie.
Right.
That they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. And that's what's coming. I feel like with the loss of freedom, you are damned as an individual.
Right.
You lose the right to your life. That's what's coming next. You lose the right to your liberty. That's what comes after.
Right.
You lose the right to your property.
Well,
That's what wickedness is.
Right. I think you give that all up for this false sense of security that all will be well, right? But when you give those things up, you lose that ability to become that wild animal, right? To be able to create. It's, let me hand over all that I am and can be for this.
Exactly, and without this, you lose. Without this liberty, you lose the desire for this pursuit of happiness, which
Mm-hmm.
is passion,
Mm-hmm.
desires, love,
Creation.
creation, building,
Right. Leaving this legacy.
entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
But we are bound to give thanks always to God for you, brethren, beloved of the Lord, because God hath from the beginning chosen you to salvation through sanctification of the Spirit and belief of the truth. And I think this is talking about those few who still see the truth.
Or want to see the truth.
Or want to see the truth. Because it's not too late at this point.
No.
This is only the beginning stages. And as we look further on in this podcast series, we're going to see the pattern of, okay, when is it too late? And that's coming, but it hasn't come yet.
Right. We're looking for the sign of that tipping point, right?
We're looking for the sign of the tipping point. Whereunto he called you by our gospel to the obtaining of the glory of our Lord Jesus Christ. If you're willing to stand up, you'll have that glory return to you.
Right. You'll be able to see truth.
Therefore, brethren, stand fast, and hold the traditions which ye have been taught, whether by word or our epistle. Our traditions are so powerful to hold on to.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a difference between standing in this box and holding on to your traditions.
Mm-hmm.
Holding on to the traditions is holding on to hope.
Mm-hmm.
The traditions that our founding fathers have set up for us is a tradition to hold on to natural law.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tradition to be that wild animal and to look for freedom, to go down the wilderness and to explore.
Right.
Without those traditions, what do we have? And what is happening today with our history is being completely destroyed. Do you think that's an accident?
No, I don't think that's an accident.
They don't even teach the same things. In 10 small years, what they used to teach as history and what they teach today, it doesn't even touch the traditions of the past.
Right. Well, it's all become skewed, and they're instituting these programs and lessons that the creators have literally come out and said, well, it's just journalism. It's just, yeah, we might have stretched a little bit, but it's good, right?
I think this is really powerful with him saying, hold on to those traditions. Don't lose sight of them. Because soon when you lose those traditions, you're not moving at 1% shift incrementals anymore. You're shifting 20%, 30%, 50%. You don't even know what's coming. It's shifting so fast. And you have nothing to hold on to anymore to say, well, where should it be? Now our Lord Jesus Christ himself and God, even our Father, which hath loved us and hath given us everlasting consolation and good hope through grace, comfort your hearts and establish you in every good word and work. Hey, go find what's good. Hold on to those traditions.
Go back to that foundation.
Go to that foundation and work. Don't be a little afraid to leave what's comfortable. Leave the cave and walk out into that wilderness. Start that little fire with wood. Go out. You might have to go hunting. It's time to get uncomfortable, because if we don't do this now, I think we're lost as a nation.
Yeah. If there's not a group of people or individuals who can ignite that fire in them to go out and be creators, be hunters, be these wild animals that can create this legacy and this movement that will save us, we will fall. Freedom will be lost forever.
This election is a crossroads for the American people. We can't change it. We can't shift it because, as the verse said, we're looking for the pattern of history. He will be removed.
Right.
It's a crossroads in people better wake up and realize where we're at in the throes of history. Because if they don't, it becomes too late. We have to look for the patterns of history. We have to look at human nature. It doesn't change. It never has changed. In thousands of years, it never has changed. We keep on making the same mistakes over and over again because human nature doesn't change. After World War I, they said, we're so above war, we'll never have another war.
And then they did.
We think we get to a place of empathy and love. We love so hard that we can never fall like our ancestors before us. They still do. Many of us will continue blindly following our politicians. We will continue and blindly follow the media. We'll continue following blindly our peers. We'll stay in that cave. We'll look at that stone wall. We want for that security, we'll keep our hands and our feet chained and our heads. Don't look this way. Don't look this way. I see no evil, hear no evil.
Mm-hmm.
But that's when it collapses. If we don't stand up and learn from the patterns of history today, we know what comes next. It's the loss of our individual freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
We have to realize and we have to know that it's our duty
Mm-hmm.
to protect these inalienable rights. It's our duty when government gets bad to say, this is no longer good. It's time for us to step away.
Mm-hmm.
And it's our duty for us to stand up so that future generations can find this love of liberty, follow their continual journey of pursuit of happiness, and have a life that is worth living. And may they say about our generation that we stood and corrected it because we saw what was coming. This is the first episode of Threading History, where we will continue to unravel the past that you may see where we're at in the disjunction of history.
Tip, tip, tip.